Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We are back once again to bring you a PLE predictions video, this time for NXT Vengeance Day, which is set to take place this Saturday at the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. A very unique NXT PLE in that it only has two title matches and three non title matches. The average weekly episode of NXT seems like it usually has at least as many title matches as this particular PLE. But what this PLE does have going for it are lots of long standing feuds, very appropriate for the name of this event. So, per usual, we will go through every single announced match and let you kind of know where our head's at and give you kind of our predictions on who we think will win and just our general thoughts on each contest. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first matchup of the evening, which is Tatum Paxley going up against Izzi Dane, who is defending her NXT Women's North American Championship. KP, any chance Tatum gets back that title from Izzi here?
I think on the face of it, this one's quite difficult to predict because naturally speaking, when you look at the feud between the two ladies, it makes so much sense for Tatum to win because it's essentially been Izzy sort of like being a thorn in the side of Dame for quite some time now. On the back of that though, in terms of their last matchup between the two of them, Tatum won that match. So I guess, in that sense, it sort of opens things up for maybe not a clear cut decision. And then also you've got Izzy Dame being the North American Women's Champion, and she hasn't held the title for that long. So is she just a title holder just in placement for when Tatum Paxley comes along and takes it away from her? Maybe that could be the case here, but I don't really know how this one's gonna play out. I'm a little bit confused by it because you can make cases for both women. I think both are pretty good arguments to get the result here. There's definitely not in my mind an absolute 100% certainty as to who's going to win. It is quite challenging to predict an option here. I think I've had to absolutely choose though, just based on the feud, based on everything these two women have been through, who sort of like come off worse, I guess you could say, like who needs a win more than the other one. I I guess I would say Tatum, but at the same time, Izzy, if she loses, like that momentum that she's got just sort of like goes away, and I feel like it's maybe a little bit wasted. But if anyone's going to take the title from her, it's got to be Tatum Paxley. That's just my opinion. So if we don't do this now, do we do this again at a later date? Maybe, but that'll be like the fourth match between these two ladies. So I'm not entirely sure if that's really going to be the best idea. I think Tatum winning makes the most sense, but I'm not 100% certain of that. So I'm going to say Paxley. You can definitely argue for both women here. To be fair, I'm not entirely certain. And also, you all as well as all of this, you've also got the fact that the culling they could be involved as well. I mean, there have been talks saying that that's not going to happen, but you know, can you really trust Izzy like that? I don't know if you can. I'm going to go with Paxi though. What about you? This is a tough one for me personally, but where does your head lie with this?
It is a tough one, and I feel like you raised quite a few good points. And I think kind of the reasoning why this is so tough, and I think that can be said for pretty much every match on this card, with one exception. But this feud has been going on since NXT Gold Rush, when Dame turned on Paxley, costing her the NXT Women's Championships. And now we've kind of shifted gears over to the North American one. I feel like this one I feel like Tatum eventually has to win, kind of what you were saying. Just for the story we're telling here, she's constantly being bested as the babyface. Eventually, she has to, as they usually do, kind of get her comeuppance, get the title. I think the question for me is, when do we do it? Do we do it here at Vengeance Day, or do we wait until Roadblock, which is just a week before Stand and Deliver, when both of those are, just a month ish out. So certainly lots of opportunities. So I think if there was a rivalry that was set to go on further, continuing the storyline, I think this is probably the most likely to do so. And kind of the points you have already made, but Tatum can take another loss. She's the babyface, and she can just continue spiraling, or however it is she does what she does. Whereas, as you also mentioned, Izzy, I think, needs that momentum continued, both as a champion to make it a credible reign, and also just to kind of keep her momentum as a heel, as where she's still kind of being established. Whereas I don't think a loss really hurts Tatum. So for me, I think I'm going to go with Izzy. I think Izzy to retain here and continue that, and maybe like a stand and deliver kind of moment. At least that's where my head's head's at, where Tatum finally gets the win. I have no issues with continuing that feud for that long. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into the next contest, which has Lola Vice going up against Kelani Jordan in an NXT Underground match. Obviously, the Underground match probably would kind of play in the favor of Lola, but she does kind of have that injury to her hand. KP, what are you making of this one? Who do you think is going to get out with the victory?
I guess you could sort of make a vouch for both ladies in this case as well, thanks to obviously the injury that's been sort of inflicted upon Lola by Kelani prior to this one that you've mentioned already. I think without that, I just go with the Lola win 100%. Like, I don't really doubt that decision. I do feel like Kalani's had a lot of the momentum going into this matchup, so logically it makes sense still to go for Lola Vice to get the victory, and I think maybe she could sort of like clutch up a win somehow still. I'd be interested to see how Kalani gets on in this matchup, because she doesn't really stand out to me as someone that would do a match like this. But obviously she has had like a little bit of training beforehand with Shayna Baszler, so I guess you could make the claim that that will be enough. But yeah, I think this is going to be definitely an interesting contest to see how it plays out, because it's got to be won by knockout as well. I really can't envisage Lola being defeated here, even still with the injury. I can't see it happening. I'm going to go Lola Vice to win against Kelani Jordan, but I, yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one for sure, but yeah, Lola to win for me personally. I think that, she's been quite well protected in these matches in the past, beating the names that she's beaten in these ones. I think she'll get another victory here, and it'll be like a big moment for her, fighting through that injury already sustained prior to this, and sort of like coming out trumps in the end, getting one over Kalani, which she hasn't been able to do. So yeah, that's where my mind's at. I think it finally is her moment where she's going to get the victory over Kalani Jordan. What about you though, Nick? Are you thinking differently to me? Are you going for a Kalani win, or are you thinking, you know what, Lola, yeah, that probably will happen for her?
First of all, it was great to see Shayna on last week's episode of NXT, and I think probably the reason they did that was just to make Kalani feel like she has a chance, even with Lola being injured. She still has one good fist and two good legs, so I feel like that's probably what they're selling there. Obviously, she is the babyface to make that victory. I think Lola losing here would kind of take a lot of the credibility that she does have, kind of in it with her background. So I do think Kalani losing here really doesn't matter all that much, and Lola just getting the win here does make sense, although you could argue simply that Kalani getting the win here would be that much bigger. I just think that Lola has a lot more to lose than Kalani does to gain as far as the character dynamic and kind of going forward. So I am also going to go with Lola getting the win here as well. Getting into the next contest, we have the biggest rivalry, the longest one at least, on the card here, the one that's been going on for essentially a year. Tony blames Dark State for breaking up his family and vowed that on his return he would destroy Dark State. And honestly, been doing a pretty decent job of that. KP, does Tony finish the job here, or does Dark State, the numbers game, kind of come into play?
Yeah, he's made it look pretty easy work so far, to be fair, Tony, isn't he? He's been storming his way through the group and really getting like a comeuppance upon the four members. I feel like if you were to have Tony lose this matchup, then he'll just try again, right? I would assume like he'll just keep on sort of rinse and repeat until he gets the job done eventually. I feel like he took out the other three going into this one so that he's got Dion Lennox specifically in a matchup here, because Dion is considered to be the better wrestler of the four in the singles competition. So I think they've done it quite smartly there. It makes a lot of sense. I can't imagine why they would have Tony lose this matchup. Like, he's highlighted that he's come back for two reasons in NXT. He's already been in NXT for quite some time, been in for a good few years now. So logically speaking, he's up in the upper echelon of the men's division. A loss here sets him back. It does keep the rivalry building on screen with him and Dark State. But I think that would also happen if he was to beat Dion Lennox. So I just think there's more to gain from Tony winning this matchup as opposed to him losing. And then we just sort of like see him, I don't know, like postponed with his momentum that he's been carrying off. And his plans will take place a little bit later on once he eventually does get the victory over Darkseid. Because it's inevitable. You know it's going to happen eventually. But why stop it here? I don't really understand why that would take place. So I'm going to go with the Tony D'Angelo win. Just looking forward, like, as like what happens next if either of these men win. I think it just makes way more sense for Tony to beat Dion Lennox here. So that's where I'm going with. That's where my head's at. and I'm pretty certain about that as well. What about you, though? Are you thinking the same as me? This is, I guess you could argue that there are cases for both, but I'd say I'm pretty much there. What about you, though?
This one's bittersweet for me because, as you well know, as I'm sure the listeners did as well, but it's been a while since I've done anything in NXT now that you've been handling the weekly shows. But I was really high on Dark State, thought they had a lot of momentum. I do feel like a lot of that momentum has been kind of taken away from them. And then with this being the kind of the head of Dark State, if you will, arguably. Going up against Tony D'Angelo and then losing to Tony as well after kind of being single-handedly taken out by Tony. I think that does kind of further that kind of point I'm making. And the Dark State hasn't been booked as strong lately, but yeah, it's tough, but I do think it does make the most sense for Tony to win. Obviously, this is, like I said, it's been a very long rivalry leading up to this, a very long standing feud. And if he doesn't get the win here, then I feel like that's really the easy out. Like, obviously, Dark State still has a numbers game. We just don't know if they're 100%, but still, four guys on one should be able to take care of the issue. But I hope that doesn't happen simply because that would feel like a cheap out and we wouldn't get much of a contest here. I'm hoping it's just one on one. We can kind of see Tony as a single star, which we haven't had a ton of experience doing. I'm all for Tony getting a win here, even if it just basically I just want it to be a one-on-one contest. Tony get the win there, and then they can continue because I feel like if the rest of Dark State comes down and they still get bested, then I'm very concerned about the future of that team. But yeah, I am too going to go with Tony to get the win here. With that, we'll move on to the next contest, which has Jaida Parker going up against Blake Monroe in a street fight. Another rivalry that's been pretty heated. Both of these women clearly are not fans of each other. KP, who do you got coming out of this one?
First and foremost, really looking forward to this matchup because it should be a lot of fun. Street fights are always great to see, and I think these two are really going to just go hell to leather with each other, which would be quite nice. In terms of how I think this one's going to go down, you could make arguments for either because obviously Jada Parker only recently coming back from injury and such, or we think injury anyway, we assume so. She's out for some time. Being back now and going straight after someone like Blake Monroe, a win for Jada would be absolutely massive. It would be huge. But on the other hand, I think that Blake's been taken quite a few losses recently, and I feel like any more, and she sort of gets pushed down to a point where her credibility starts to drop and drop and drop. And I think we're a little bit in sort of worrying territory with that right now. So I think she really kind of desperately needs a win here. Like I'm not saying that I want Jada to lose, but I think the more important thing is that just Blake gets a victory here and she looks good again. Because I can't remember the last time she won like a matchup where I thought, oh, good, that's that's great for her. She needed that sort of thing. Like I feel like this is going to be the case where she has to get that done. Momentum then going in stand and deliver as well, possibly coming off the back of that one. Maybe these two somehow are involved in something else. I don't know because I can't see this ending here. It doesn't really seem like something that is just going to end right at this particular matchup. So I can expect something later on afterwards. But yeah, I don't think Blake should be losing in this match. I really, really don't. So I'm going to go with Blake to win. Ever since she had that North American Championship and she lost it, it's been sort of downhill. So I feel like it's about time we put her back upwards. So I'm going to go with that. But no discredit to Jaida Parker. I like Jaida as well. It's just, I think, more importantly, Blake needs a win. So that's what I'm going with. What about you, though, Nick? You can make an argument here with either of these ladies wanting and needing a win. I think Blake's more important. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, you can make an argument for both, and you did, and kind of I will as well because yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head. I think Blake. I think a lot of people argued that she shouldn't even be on NXT. They thought that she should just go straight to main at WWE. And honestly, I can see your kind of points for that. But yeah, it's safe to say her run in NXT hasn't been stellar. I think from a character standpoint, it has been. From a win-loss record, though, you could absolutely make the case that it hasn't been. She hasn't shined. I think that's fair to say. But then Jada Parker, who's gone for 3 months, she's ever since she's been back, been going straight at Monroe here. So yeah, it definitely is hard. I would put this as the hardest match to decide. And if it were any other stipulation, I would say I wouldn't be mad at a draw here, but it's a street fight, so can't really do that. I mean, maybe they could find a creative way to do it. But I think in the end, I think Jada still has, a lot of work to do from a career standpoint. Whereas I feel like Blake Monroe is kind of at that point in her career where she needs to really start heading towards main and making progress to do so. And I think a win here will get her back on track. Kind of, like I said, she has the character work, but she needs the wins to back it up. Whereas Jada is clearly over, at least at NXT level. So I think she has plenty of time to right the ship if she does eat a loss here. So I think I too am going to go with Blake Monroe, but definitely the hardest one on the card for me. Getting into what I assume will be the main event, and that is Ricky Saints going up against Joe Hendry, who is defending his NXT championship. For me, probably the easiest to decide and the least important story, at least from my end. KP, what are you making of this one?
Well, first and foremost, honestly, I don't mind who wins this as long as we don't see another Ricky Saints performance like we saw on NXT, because my god, that was interesting, as well, I'll say. For this matchup, though, itself, I mean, it provides something quite interesting. You haven't had the title very long on Joe Hendry. It was almost sort of dubbed in that ladder match as him being the man that's going to lead NXT forward after, like, I guess you could say the era of Obafemi. So naturally, in that sense, why take the title away from him so soon? Especially with somebody who has actually been on top of the NXT division before, lost out to Obafemi once again, and hasn't sort of like won it back. Although there has been a bit of like a sort of like a back and forth between the two men. Ricky came very close, didn't quite get it done, and now Joe Hendry just does sort of like take it from him. I feel like it's so easy to say Ricky Saints will win this back because you've got Vanity Project, you've got like Ethan Page, who have sort of like all been aligned with Ricky. But then you've also got guys that have been aligned against those guys. So I guess this could be quite the hectic display on the outside of the matchup here. I think there could be a lot of interference and distractions here from this matchup. I think it just makes more sense for Joe Hendry to retain. Like, I can't see why they take it away from him so soon. So I'm going to go with Hendry to retain his championship. But I mean, I'm not against Ricky Saints winning it back. I'm really not. I'm open to the idea. But I just think it makes a logical sense to have Hendry retain. So that's what I'm going to go with. You said this one's quite easy. So how easy is it for you? Who's walking out of NXT Vengeance Day with the NXT Championship?
For me, I think it has to be Joe Hendry. Like you said, he just got the title, and I feel like just Ricky being back here. What is the reason for that outside of I was the last person to hold it that's still on the roster. I guess that's kind of really the only reason I'm seeing he thinks that he should have it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just not seeing a reason for Ricky to take it back and kind of kill the momentum. But honestly, I'm kind of conflicted on a couple of things. The first one being Ricky Saints and him kind of as a heel. I love him as a heel much more so than I did as a face. I thought his face gimmick was a little bit stale. His heel gimmick, I think, is going quite well. I would agree with you though. I would rather never have to see a performance like we did this last week. That was an interesting performance, I guess we could say, but definitely better as a heel. But Joe Hendry, I think Joe Hendry is going to be one of those guys who does much better as the face and as the one who is chasing. I feel like once he got that title, I know it's still been a very short amount of time, but it feels like his character has kind of altered a bit. Now he's kind of more serious. So it could be just a knee jerk reaction, but that's kind of where my head's at. I think that Joe Hendry does need to keep this kind of build him up as a credible star. Plenty of guys to challenge him, but I don't think Ricky Saints. He seems to be kind of aligning with a few other guys on the roster currently. So I think he has plenty to do, whereas I think Joe Hendry can take this at least through stand and deliver. So I too am going to go with Joe Hendry to get the win here. But with that, NXT Vengeance Day predictions in the books. How are you all feeling about NXT Vengeance Day and what are your predictions? We would love to hear from you in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as well, as that helps us out tremendously over here at The Push. We'll be back shortly with that SmackDown recap as well as those NXT Vengeance Day reactions after the event on Saturday. But until next time, this has been The Push with Nick and KP. We'll see you soon. Take care.